Like I have a mass market theme, a fantasy, a romance, a paranormal romance, and then like a half shelf of YA because I just don't read a lot of it. So
Yeah, I definitely need another shelf to be able to do that. So TBD.
yeah. Anyway, all right. Well, after all that chit chat, welcome back, everyone. This is Big Fantasy Energy. I'm Ashley.
And I'm Jared. Woo!
Woo! And we're so excited. This is our third book in our November theme, which is Indigenous authors.
Yes.
And we're really excited to jump in today. We're covering The Witch King by H.E. Edgmon.
Edgmon. Yeah.
So yeah, we're really excited to get this going, excited to talk about this one. So I'll hand it off to Jared for our synopsis and then his review.
Okay, yeah. So The Witch King, we actually had to make a pivot this a month. We won't say the book that we pivoted from, but we read a book and we were both like, no.
Nah.
So we're trying to keep it, balanced with like different types of books, to birth authors, things we might like, we might not like, but we both read it and we were like, we can't review this. So
Well, and the
it
goal is
was rough.
also we don't ever want to we want to give our honest reviews, but we're also not out here to be assholes.
Right, totally.
We were both raised in the mindset if you don't have anything nice to say, don't say anything at all.
Mm-hmm.
So
And
we're
we couldn't.
we're not gonna say anything at all on this one.
Yeah, so we're just gonna skip it. But needless to say, we changed books and we picked up this book, which is we're glad that we were able to find another Indigenous author.
Yeah.
And it's a diverse read. We'll get into that more later. But so to set the stage for The Witch King, it's in upper state New York. We have Aslan, which is a fae kingdom hidden from humans. And in this realm, there are fae and witches who are born to fae, but they're like different in their magic and how they're treated amongst the fae. Sadly, prejudice isn't exclusive to the human world. Shocker. Anyway, the story follows. I know, right? It's like, couldn't there be a world where there's none of that? But no, it wouldn't be realistic. So, the story follows our MMC Wyatt, who is a gay trans man and a witch born to fae parents. So Wyatt has fled Aslan and his unwanted betrothal to marry Amir, who is the adopted fae prince of Aslan. And Wyatt finds himself living a normal-ish human life in good old Laredo, Texas. That was such a fun little surprise.
Yeah, right.
I was like, come on, Texas. With his newfound best friend, Briar. So Wyatt, is slowly acclimating to his new home and his chosen family when his tall, dark, and handsome fae fiance Amir shows up in Texas. So shit is going down apparently in Aslan, and Amir is insistent on bringing Wyatt back to fulfill their engagement and to get married. And Wyatt wants nothing more than to tell Amir to fuck off. But unfortunately for him, there is a blood contract that basically means Wyatt's got to marry Amir or he dies. So fun choices. Yeah. Like, what are they going to do? Anyway.
Who's to say?
It's die or... yeah, so with his bestie Briar in tow, reluctantly, Wyatt returns to Aslan with Amir, and he's faced with skeletons from his past while trying to figure out what the fuck he's going to do with his very uncertain future. So that is my little synopsis summary of The Witch King by H.E. Edgmon. So my review. Okay, so I give it 3 stars and I give it 1 spice. I will say, like, just to the podcast, if anyone, which literally no one does, maybe like Sarah and Raquel, but if you follow me on Goodreads as well as our podcast, you'll see that I sometimes change ratings like a couple weeks later. So sometimes when I say I rate something on the podcast and you go onto Goodreads and you're like, that's not what he said on the podcast. Once it settles, sometimes change my mind. But anyway, I feel like this is 3 stars, 1 spice. I thought it kind of started for me as a little bit more adult fantasy or new adult in like the first third, but then like definitely the back 2/3, I was like, oh yeah, this is a YA book.
Yeah.
It just like read YA, which I think that's what it was supposed to be. It wasn't like it was
Yes.
marketing
It's
it
YA.
something.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I thought the book had a great message, and it was really cool to see trans representation in the main
Mhm.
character and in other characters. And then even more specifically, the fact that the character was a trans man who identified as gay. I think that was really unique and interesting, and it was cool to see that perspective.
Definitely.
Um, I thought the story was like super easy to read. It wasn't, even though there were a lot of characters, I felt like it wasn't very confusing.
Mhm.
I did kind of think Wyatt, the MMC, was kind of a mess in terms of his character choices. And he's been through so much, and he's like super young, right? Because he's 17.
Yeah.
But I did find him like a little frustrating at times. But
Mhm.
yeah, so I thought the pace was pretty quick. I thought the story was more plot driven for me, and like hear me out, because
Okay.
there's a lot of like characters and they talk a lot about them. But for me personally, I liked the characters, but I just didn't think they had a lot of depth. Like I don't
Agreed.
really, so I thought they were kind of flat. Like the
Mhm.
characters, not that I didn't like them, I was like, yeah, I like them, but I don't have any information more about them as a person to really love them or dislike them. So,
Well, and like
um,
comparatively to, I'm just gonna go back to one that
uh,
we were like, The Wicked and Me, all the
oh, right.
side characters, as we were talking about with that one, like all the side characters, they felt like distinct personalities. Even the smallest tertiary characters had like motives we could feel. So
Yeah.
yeah, I agree with
I
you.
think also with the Wicked and Me, it was also like they were a legit ensemble. Like
Yeah.
they were so like connected, and you really felt the connection between the characters, and I think that was like really
Yeah.
different from this book. But yeah, I liked them. But anyway, I did think it was a little bit more plot driven. But then in with that being said, like I do think the plot kind of moved slow in moments. But it was such a quick read. It's like 380 pages. I only know
Yeah.
that because I just finished it today. Um, so anyway, it's definitely more plot driven. I don't know what the intention was, because the author introduces lots of characters, but they just don't have much depth, like I said. And then I thought Amir was written as like kind, sweet, noble character, and that's how I envisioned him. But like at the end of the day, he was forcing Wyatt to come back against his will. So like
Mhm.
there is that aspect, but like he's very lovable and like you like him, but then you're like, oh, he did do this shitty thing. Like Wyatt doesn't want to be here. Um, I liked Briar, his best friend. I thought she was really cool. I thought they added, like, she had a lot more depth at the end of the book, which we'll talk about
Mhm.
after spoilers. Like I was like, oh, okay, there were just a lot more, you got to learn more about her motives and everything else. So I wanted her in there more. I wanted to just some of the side characters, I wish they were in there more. Anyway, overall I thought there
Yeah.
were a lot of awe moments. Like it's definitely like YA with the way they flirt and all that stuff. Like,
100%.
I like their text flirting, but I definitely thought it was cute, and I was like, "Aw," like I enjoyed it. I thought the witches being discriminated against, I felt like that's like really symbolic to like queer and trans people in our
Yeah.
worlds, and they bring up racism, how it's a thing in the human world, and that how like they kind of allude to like the Fey world starting to adopt some of the things that the human world does, like namely racism, because they just like mentioned something about like how they don't know if racism was a thing in the Fey world, but then it's starting to become possibly a thing, and they wonder if they've like adopted it from like the human world, which I thought was a really
Mhm.
interesting take. Anyways, so like the back, and then my only other thing I'll say is like I did think Wyatt, just like going back to him as a main character, he was a little frustrating, and he has gone through like so much trauma, and I'm sure that's a lot of why he's this way. But I thought like he was really back and forth in terms of like which side he was gonna play, which was kind of like annoying. Like
Yeah.
I was like, girl, not like to like misgender him. Like I
No,
just
no,
say like
no.
girl, like I was like,
Yeah.
boy, like get your shit together. Like what are you gonna do? And then I also thought towards the end, I'll talk about it in the spoilers, but I just thought he was like very hypocritical about like his judgments towards other people whenever he was like doing the same thing.
Yeah.
Like with
Wait.
Amir, and then specifically with Briar at the end, I was like, bitch, what are you talking about? Like you're getting mad about something when you did it as well. So
Mhm. Yeah.
anyway, I liked it. I definitely think I liked the whole book. I would say the whole book was a 3 for me.
Yeah.
I will say the last like 50 pages made me way more interested in the book, like to read the
Hmm.
second than like the rest. So I wouldn't bump up the rating at all, but I definitely thought the last like 3 chapters, I was like, oh, okay, this is really interesting. I really wonder where they're going to go because they leave a lot of stuff open for the second book.
Yeah.
So yeah, 3 stars, 1 spice.
Love
What
it.
you got for me, Ashley?
I have the same thing.
I
3
did it.
stars, 1 spice.
I think it's
Um,
really, I feel like we would have like aligned more often. It's just I always fuck up the spice ratings. So I literally had to watch our first episode and be like, what am I supposed to be rating on spice? So like when it was like happening, the sexier scenes, I was like,
yeah.
I'm gonna get this right. So because Ashley's like, we literally fucking did a podcast episode about this. And I'm like, I need to get this accurate. So I did. And I felt like,
But
oh look, we aligned.
yeah, but it's also YA, so it's not like a YA is really
Fair,
truly going
fair.
to be more than like 1 star,
Right.
maybe 2. If
Totally.
if you're trying to call ACOTAR YA, which when it first came out, they did try to do that. So
Interesting.
yeah.
Okay.
But overall, I thought that this book was was a good blend. I wouldn't say really good, a good blend of social commentary and action-driven plot. Like sometimes with stories like this, you get like if there's going to be social commentary, like the action-driven plot kind of
Mhm.
comes down a little bit. But
Yeah.
I felt like this was a decent blend of that. I felt like there was a plot that I could consistently see it moving towards in this while still having a pretty strong social commentary, obviously. I thought it was a beautiful found family story with obviously really good representation. I did find myself I I wrote that I found myself rooting for Wyatt, but also annoyed with his decisions a lot. But then
Totally.
I would remind myself he's 17.
Fair,
And I
fair.
had to keep reminding myself that he's 17.
Yeah.
I was a fuckhead at 17.
Oh, girl,
I
I was a mess
was
at
an
17.
idiot. I was a
Yeah.
hypocritical little bitch at 17.
Oh, I was a
So,
big motherfucker at
yeah,
17. Yeah,
exactly.
hot mess.
I personally felt like Amir, Emmer, whatever, could have been in the book a little bit more. I felt
Yeah.
like I felt like this whole thing and like Wyatt being upset with Emmer and like all that, like I didn't understand sometimes. I also didn't understand like all of a sudden once again 17. But I also didn't understand where all of a sudden he's like, I've loved him and I've always loved him. And I was like, but what has he done to rectify the situation? Because you guys have spent like 0 time together and even less alone together to have any sort of conversations. Like they were maybe alone on page in this entire book, maybe 25 pages.
Yeah, and I think it would have made more sense to me if like the inner dialogue of Wyatt throughout the
Mm-hmm.
book had given us more crumbs of him possibly like but it didn't
Like
really to
thinking
me
things through.
yeah, to me it didn't read as he was like suppressing feelings for Emir or
No,
Emmer. It read
whatever.
more
Yeah.
like he used to like him, but he doesn't like him anymore. Like that's what it
Yeah.
read as. So whenever he turned around, I totally get what you're saying. I was like,
But
it seemed a little
like
rushed.
so mad at him for something that happened before he left but they don't really talk about it.
Right.
So
We have no clue.
I didn't know if some of it was just like repressed rage of
Fair. Yeah.
like not repressed rage of like Wyatt repressing it, but of Wyatt being repressed in
Yeah.
so many
So
circumstances
many
and he
ways.
just
Yeah.
kind of took it
Poor thing.
out on Amir. So I don't know. But I thought that the relationship was cute, but I also thought it felt really rushed to me. Like it felt kind of like out of nowhere in terms of like Wyatt just accepting me because like really the only thing Wyatt ever kept doing was being like, he's really hot, of course I'm gay. He's really hot, of course I'm gay. With it,
Yeah.
and I was like,
I'm gay. Like, yeah.
okay, I'm obviously gay. And I'm like,
Because I'm obviously attracted
okay.
to him. I'm gay. I was like,
Yeah,
yeah.
yeah, okay. Okay. So, maybe that's a me thing. I'm not quite sure.
I'm trying to remember
Um,
when I was 17 if I was like always telling myself I was gay because I'm like, what did I do at 17? I don't
yeah.
know. I definitely would be
But
like, wow, he's hot, but I don't like think I had internal dialogue of being like, he's hot because I'm gay. I'm like, no, he's just hot.
see, that's the thing too, is that obviously as a heterosexual sexual woman, I also though definitely, and this is a little bit more common in heterosexual women, is that I can also look at a woman and go, that woman is so fucking hot, and not have to
Feel
reaffirm my own
right,
sexuality for
totally.
it.
Yeah.
Um, and, and I know women do that more than men
Mm.
tend to do that anyway.
Yes, yeah, cis hetero
Yeah.
men probably don't do that a lot,
Oh, yeah.
or they say it and then
Yeah.
they like have to like, but no homo or some
But
bullshit
yeah,
like that.
no. My dad and brother will
Oh
be
my
like,
gosh.
my dad and brother will be like, that guy is hot. Like, that guy is objectively hot. And I'm like, thank you, dad and brother, for
Good for
reaffirming that
them. Yeah, literally
yeah,
good for them.
even though you are who you are,
Yeah,
you
we kind of
accept
talked.
this.
We kind of talked about this. Not to like interrupt your review, but
No.
like we kind of talked about this like when we were texting. But I also think there's something to be said about like Ashley is so great. Like she's a phenomenal ally, and she's like saying like as a cis hetero woman.
Yeah.
But even like me, like as a gay man, I cannot at all wrap my head around what it's like to be trans, right? So
Hmm.
I think perhaps the constant like internal dialogue of Wyatt telling himself he's gay or bringing it up all the time, like maybe it's just because it's so wrapped into like his identity of like how long
Yeah.
it took him probably to come to terms with being
Yeah.
trans, and then on top of that be like, oh, I'm trans and actually I'm not attracted to women, I'm a trans gay man, which
Yeah.
probably just like really threw him for a loop. So we kind of talked about that. I was like, maybe that's like
Yes, we
adding
did.
another layer as to why he's always doing it. But it did feel like a lot because like he references being gay like quite often,
A
but
lot. And
mo-
it's also
more so than he
in his,
references himself being trans.
yeah.
I
And
think
also,
I would say
but that made a little more sense to me because it's not something he has to remind himself of. He
fair.
is a man.
Yeah.
And but then that's what got me with the gay thing, because it was like every 5 pages. And it's hardly ever out loud. It's always in his head. And
Mhm.
I was just like, I
It
okay,
almost
I
makes more
get
sense if
it.
he would have said it out loud.
Yeah,
It like
yeah,
of course I'm gay. Hello, like that.
yeah,
But it was
yeah.
kind of interesting and internal. Yeah.
So, but anyway, moving on.
Mm.
Um, I thought that the world was really interesting. I thought it was a
Yeah.
different take on fairies and fae than what we've seen done before. It reminded me of, like, the setup of it reminded me a little bit of Halfling Saga.
Hmm.
Um, but in a different way. Obviously, like the fae have in this book have a very different outward appearance. In terms of like they're more mythological. They have wings and horns and stuff like that. But I just thought it was really interesting. I wish we had gotten more of the magic system. I don't feel like we stuck very much into like how the like them doing things with magic
Yeah. No,
or
you're
like
totally right.
anything like that. I would have much more enjoyed that. I definitely wished we had seen, like, Wyatt kept being like, I never learned to be a witch. I never learned to be a witch. I want to learn stuff. But then would just say that and then would like ask someone and then we never actually did anything about it.
Yeah.
And that irritated me. I was like, come
I
on,
like
dude, come on,
give
let's
us
go
some
look at this.
magic. Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
I
hundred
want to
percent.
see it.
No, they really don't until like
Um,
the end, and that's
and
like
then
pretty
But
much
then
it.
Briar's the one doing it. It's not even like Briar's the one like kind of like reading books and doing stuff like that. Wyatt's not even doing it. Anyway. So I was
Yeah.
just irritated with that. I also really was confused because like there's like within this world of Fae, there's like 5 or 6 different kingdoms of like the Fae overall, and they have their own little worlds and stuff like that. But this kingdom specifically seemed to have a problem, and maybe it's because they're in North America, and like that's another allegory to all the shit show that is the United States.
Yeah.
But this kingdom of Fae seemed to have an issue with Emmer being the like the heir to the throne because he's adopted.
Yeah.
And the other ones don't really seem to have an issue with like that
Well,
concept
yeah, and like
because
to your point though, because there's two other of the kingdoms have like, one is like a male
mhm,
couple and the other is a
and they've
female
just
female couple.
Yeah,
And
and the
so like
male couple just had kids, so they didn't go into it a lot, but you have to assume
they
it's at
could be
least adopted
adopted.
by one party. It has to
Right.
be adopted by at least one party.
Right,
So,
totally. So
yeah.
like they obviously don't have an issue with it. I just feel like in
Yeah.
general, maybe it is like you said, like they're trying to draw the comparison to like North America, but it did feel like Aslan was like definitely as far as the Fey realms go. You don't learn a lot about the other ones, but just like
No.
the fact that they have gay leaders in two of the other
Yeah.
four, it's a little bit more like they just have a lot of hang-ups on things, like prejudice and
Yeah.
like worrying about an
And
adopted right to the throne. It's just like a lot
and
of
wanting to
backwards
stick
shit.
true to traditions and stuff like
Tradition,
that.
yeah,
Yeah.
girl, yeah,
It's
get out of
it's
here.
it is obviously a very, very thinly veiled allegory to the United States and our social, cultural,
Issues,
political issues.
yeah,
So, but like very thinly veiled. But I wonder if like for some teenagers it's a little bit more veiled, where it just kind of gets them thinking a bit more.
yeah, and maybe
Um,
too. I think also Breyer brings up this isn't like like a very important spoiler, but she
no.
does like she talks about like colonialism, right? Like
Hmm.
it's at some point in the book she talks about colonialism, and like it is an indigenous author, right? So like I
Hmm.
think there are some like ties where I think they're trying to like kind of allude to the Fae having a lot of tendencies that to us as readers are a little bit more black and white. Like obviously that's not good, that's bad.
Yeah.
To like what
Yeah.
the United States or like like things that have happened in North American history,
Yeah.
right? Like specifically.
Definitely. Agreed. I also didn't really understand the story point of within Aslan, like, and once again, it's that thinly veiled allegory, but the bonds between Fae, that Fae get being biological imperatives, and like how they're all like, this is the person you're most likely to procreate with, when like that obviously isn't the
Isn't the
case,
case, right? Yeah.
because like in every other kingdom, even within their own, like, and so like I get that that's an allegory to like the Christian right in the United
Oh,
States.
yeah, totally.
So
I didn't even think
so
about that. Yeah.
but it's like, once again, but also once again, I'm not the Christian right, so I'm like, obviously not.
You're like,
I'm like, that
no.
makes no sense.
Right.
So, because I'm like, here's all these obvious, but I think it's also because the bonds are set up as like fated mates. And so we don't, as humans, as regular humans, we don't have fated mates. Like that's not something we have in our world, right? So
Dang
sad.
it.
But, but because it is set up like that in this world, like that these are fated mates, like I guess for me, that makes it even harder for me to understand why anyone would think that these bonds are biological imperatives, unless you're taking the stance of, you know, that stance of like, well, biology says that these people shouldn't procreate, which I
Yeah.
just think
Well,
is
I think
stupid.
too, like, I don't think it's like a big spoiler or anything, but like at the
No.
end, they kind of talk about how there's like doubt of if that is the case, right? So I kind of feel like a lot
Yeah.
of like how they build the world, like for the characters and for us, is like kind of like exposing at the end of it, like how the world
Yeah.
is like incorrect or like how things aren't
Yeah.
true, right? So like
Yeah.
so many things. So I think maybe in the second book that'll be something that they're like, actually, it doesn't mean that it's not biological. It's
Yeah.
like a typical fated mates or something. I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah. It's just like heart kind of like, but anyway.
It was
So
confusing. I was like, what are we doing with it?
all all throughout that, like they're using all of that as like a, like they're doing a lot of these things like in this book that is trying to mask and kind of like covertly give you this message. But at the same time, then you just have Briar coming out of nowhere and being like, bitch, that's this. And you're like,
Yeah.
fair. Just in case you didn't get that we were trying to make a subtle metaphor over here. Here
That's
we've got Briar. Yeah,
yeah, that's sexist. Colonialism. Yeah.
100%.
They're like, oh God, like
Exactly.
I love it, but I'm also like, damn girl, like show us
Yeah,
instead of tell us, but you're gonna show us
yeah,
and tell us
and
and
tell
then
us.
scream it at us. Like
So
literally just scream it
100%,
at us.
100%. And I was just like, so I just felt like this book was
Oh my
trying
god.
to like cover a lot of themes. Like it was covering colonialism, it was covering racism, it was covering LGBTQ things. It was covering so many heavy, heavy topics. And in my mind, and like some of them were up front in front of you, like some of them were hidden by the Fae witch, like
Mhm.
allegory. But overall, like I was like, at the end of the day, I thought it did it good. I just thought it could have been better if maybe we focused in a little bit, because I feel like you can cover LGBTQ and then cover like racism in with that as like in terms of like your characters.
Oh
But I
yeah.
think trying to make a stance on racism, trying to make a stance on colonialism, trying to make a stance on LGBTQ, like all separately can get a little bogging of like, I don't know what you're trying to tell me
Yeah,
sometimes.
it I feel like it was also kind of like the world that they created, and obviously it's not the same in all the other kingdoms,
Yeah.
but it was kind of like not super pro adoption, not super
Yeah.
pro witches, not super
Yeah.
pro gay, not super pro trans, not not inherently not
Not pro
racist,
technology.
pro technology, not progress. So I'm like, okay, so they're literally just like, and maybe that's what the author wants to do is like these people are like stuck in the olden days or whatever their traditional views are. And I feel like it was
Yeah.
kind of like, have they not progressed in any facet, which the other
Yeah.
kingdoms had? It was just kind of like, I agree with you. It was like they, and maybe the author wants like Emmer or Amir and, Briar and Wyatt to like conquer the world and like change all of this in the next book, which cool, but it just seems like a lot for like two people to manage changing the views on literally every topic that's wrong socially in the world. Like it's just
Yeah.
too
But
much.
then they also have the other added thing that we can get into in the spoiler section. But like there's even more. You know the book series I was reading right before we started doing the podcast, that every book it was like 4 books long, and I kept reading every book in that series 2 books, and I was like, it's because
Oh,
they keep introducing story points and they keep introducing
not doing
questions and they're
anything?
not solving any of them.
Totally.
That's
Yeah.
a little bit what I'm concerned about with this, is that like, here's the thing. I don't think any of the problems of this book, like not the problems of the book, but like like the story points
Oh,
brought up
right.
in this book are completely solvable, just because there's no ribbon, there's no happy ending, there's no like, we did it, yeah. Because that's just not the way the world works. There's always going to be someone who, and
Right.
you can get more justice, and you can get more freedoms, and you can get
But there's
some
going to be
better
cogs in the wheel.
understanding.
They're going to be like
Yeah.
backwards
Yeah.
people. Totally. Yeah.
Always. And that's just unfortunately how the world works. And so my question becomes like, where's the next book going to go with that?
Mhm.
And like, what does the resolution look like? Is it like, it obviously can't be a completely happy ending in terms of that, but yeah. So another thing I wanted to point out is this one book where we got a raging bitch sister at the beginning who turned into a not raging bitch sister. At least so far,
Actually,
she's
yeah,
been
you're
turned
right. We haven't
around.
even. We'll talk about that in the spoilers, but we haven't talked about Tessa. Yeah, like I
Yeah,
forgot. Like she's such a interesting character, and you're right. It was like, oh, the crazy, annoying, selfish,
yeah,
whatever, problematic sister. Oh, what typical, right? But like
yeah,
she ends up turning a page, which is really nice
yeah.
and unique to a lot of books we've read.
So to wrap up my review, we've meandered a bit, but it's been good.
Typical
As I,
us. Typical.
yeah, right. I think this is a really good book for like high schoolers. I wouldn't necessarily say like middle schoolers for this book. I think that this book's a little too heavy for middle schoolers. I think
Yeah.
high schoolers is a good age for this. But I think it's a very good book for high schoolers. I think it poses a lot of questions and would help a lot of kids in school at that age going through some of these questions. And then getting to see it in like a fantastical framework just alleviates a little bit of stress from it, I feel like.
Yeah, I
But once
mean,
again, this
yo,
isn't
keep
something
going.
I've ever
Sorry.
been. I was like, sorry, but once again, this isn't something that I ever went through in school, so I can't necessarily speak to that, but it feels like it would be to me.
That is such a good comment because I didn't even think about that until you said that. But it's like, when you read on like reviews or you hear, people on podcasts,
Yeah.
maybe like ours, that are like, I just don't know if I was the intended audience for this book. I definitely think we we liked it, right? But I
Yeah.
think, like, to your
We're
point,
not
if
the
I if
intended
I read
audience.
this, if I read this in high school, this book would have probably been something I was obsessed with. Like,
Yeah.
truly, like, as,
Yeah.
a little gay brown boy, not
Yep.
sure, like, where I fit in the world, reading about this, like, trans gay man who has a best friend who's a brown woman, and, like,
Yep.
this, fey, beautiful black man, like, who's gay, but, like, didn't know he was gay. Like, all the storylines, if I would have been a young adult, 17,
Yeah.
reading this book, I would have probably been obsessed with this book.
Yeah.
It's just like now I'm like, yeah, it was a good good 3-star
Yeah.
book. It was cute,
Yeah.
had a lot of great themes. So I
Well,
totally get
and
what you're
then
saying.
for us, though, also, it's like for me when I was reading it, I was like, you were saying too, like the writing was really simple. It was a little bit juvenile, but it's supposed to
Right.
be.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
It's
It wasn't
supposed to
like
be.
it wasn't like a bad thing for me. I was just like, oh yeah, this
No,
is definitely
no.
YA. This is
Yeah.
YA.
The one thing I didn't like about this in respect to thinking about young kids reading it, or high schoolers reading it, which in my mind now, since I'm in my mid-30s, is a young kid to me, um, is
Totally.
that the one thing I didn't like, and I have the same problem with Twilight, is that Wyatt is 17 and he's like being called back because he's engaged and supposed to be marrying this man who's 18. Like they're children. And that's the one
Yeah.
thing that like did irritate me, is that like they're supposed to be going back to be like married almost immediately. And like, yeah, sure, in the Fae realm, they're legal age, and like there's some places in the US in the South where that is perfectly fine.
Yeah.
But
Another topic. Yeah.
another topic for another day. But I did not enjoy that. I didn't like
Yeah.
that story.
I didn't
I
care
would
for
have,
that either. I didn't really care for that,
yeah,
especially with the fact that it was like Wyatt was going against his will. So I was like, so
yeah,
this 17-year-old's basically being kidnapped. So
100%,
yeah.
100%. But also is like an undocumented like foster child to this family.
Right.
Um,
Yeah,
so yeah.
totally.
Um, but I did like this story. I would be interested in reading on. I don't think the second book is out yet, or maybe it is, but I would be interested in reading on in this. So
Yeah, I would
yeah.
too. Should we get into
Um,
spoilers?
yes, let's do spoilers. So clap it out. The first spoiler I want to talk about, since we were just talking about it a second ago, is Tessa. Um,
Yes. Oh, that little bitch in the beginning, but God,
right?
I love her at the end.
I was like, you're gonna be another one of those goddamn awful sisters who's a fucking bitch
Who has
and
no
is just
redeeming
like, yeah,
qualities.
not at
Yeah.
all. But I will say I felt like her switch and her turn was very quick and very rushed and very unnatural.
Well, I think what's so funny is I mean, I don't know. I don't have like, I was gonna say I don't have the book in front of me, but I
It's literally right there.
do. Um, yeah. Also, for those listeners, like, this is the book. It's so cute. That's Wyatt.
It's really cute.
That's Briar, and that's Emmer or Emmer. Yeah.
Whatever.
But anyway, yeah. I think the thing is that when she changed was also when Wyatt started the relationship with Wyatt and Amir started like really ramping up, and I think that
Yeah,
was I thought both were rushed. So I feel like that whole like
yeah,
part of the book was just like from one side, and then wham, Wyatt's
yeah.
obsessed with Amir, and now his sister's super nice. I'm like, damn, a lot changed in like
Well,
a few
and
pages.
it was like in the fire where Tessa obviously has PTSD from the
Right.
fire that killed her parents, and no one knows what caused Wyatt to start the fire. There's kind of like, well, he started a fire and killed people, and no one stopped. Like when Wyatt explains a little bit, it's like a smallest fraction of what happened, because did not give the whole story, gave one tiny little like one
Yeah,
tiny
he
little
doesn't.
sentence.
Yeah.
And they were like, oh, like, and Wyatt's like, you guys thought I just killed them? Because like Wyatt killed his parents, and
Oh yeah, spoiler, Wyatt kills his parents, which is not really a spoiler because you find that out like really early.
Yeah, but
we're in the spoilers, but yeah, it's like
yeah,
they didn't know, and he's like, "Oh yeah, I didn't just do it unprovoked." I was like, "What the fuck is
because
going on?"
Wyatt's been being abused by his parents his whole life. He had been attacked right before that by some other fae because he's a witch, and like he loses control of his powers, which we find out later in the book are controlled by emotion. By in the end of the book, that are controlled by emotions.
You know what you just said that really just like clicked for me, that I also, the reason I feel like why it felt so rushed, and like tell me if you feel this is the same way with the sister, was because her being like, she goes into this whole tangent about like, you were being abused by her parents all this time, blah 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 blah, but
Yeah,
none of that is information she didn't know before. That's why it kind of felt rushed, because it was
yeah,
like she was saying like, well, I've seen the light because of how you were treated. I'm like, bitch, he's been telling you that, you lived
yeah,
that life, you
yeah.
knew that. So
But it
but
was
once
like,
he found out that like he was abused by those men, those
yeah,
annoying boys, then it clicked, and that made her like also like switch on her
hmm
parents too, which that kind of felt a little like rushed. Like, so a group of
it
boys
felt a little
abused your
bit.
brother, and now you're like besties with your brother. It just felt
It
odd.
felt not. It felt rushed, but it also felt disingenuous. It felt
Yeah,
like that's like such a big switch, and
yeah.
so it just like it really that irritated me a little bit. I was like, this is a huge switch that like now Tessa is like doting almost.
No, you're so right, because it's not even like a slow ramp up to like, hey, it
No.
was wrong.
They
Let's
don't they don't have another
relationship.
conversation. They
No,
don't have
it's literally
another
just like,
yeah.
love you. I'm here for
Yeah.
you. I'm supporting you.
You
You've
wanna
been through
talk
so
boys
much.
now? You wanna
Yeah,
talk
I'm
boys
like,
with me?
what? Which I like. I love. I like. Really think
Yeah.
I'm gonna like Tessa. I like think Tessa, another side character, Wade. I think I'm gonna really like
Mhm.
moving on. Um, but yeah, that just felt a little like, I was like, oh, good. I want Tessa to be this way, but I was also like, oh, it
Yeah.
just didn't. I don't like how we arrived here. So,
Yeah. No, I
I have
agree.
a question for you. So,
Yeah.
how do you feel? Just like in general, you've read a lot of books with Faye. Obviously, this
Mhm.
is a fantasy podcast, but like, how do you feel about like the Fae versus witch angst, and like the is that a common theme that you see, or how that
Mhm.
the witches were children of the Fae? Like, what are your thoughts in general of like how they've gotten to this point as a
I
society?
I don't think it's an uncommon, but I wouldn't say it's crazily common either. I once again go back to the Halfling saga where like the halflings are children of
Right.
Fae who like and the elves and we're not going to get into that whole clusterfuck. But anyway, so I think that you see books that do this kind of stuff, and I didn't inherently have a problem with it. The thing I had an issue with is at the end where they're like, um, witches are powered from their emotions and they are powered from like the earth. Like they get their power and their strength from the earth. So it's like a finite resource. Whereas a witch's emotions are not finite. They're always there. They're always fueling. And Wyatt kind of comes to the conclusion that like, oh, well, doesn't that mean that witches are stronger than fae? And like Jin was like, yeah, why do you think they fear us so much? And I'm like, bitches, listen. I get repression, I get all this stuff, but if you're actually stronger and more powerful and all that, and you guys like they have a learning system, there is a group of them that are learning to do stuff. It might be because most of them are being thrown out into the woods. That could be it. I was like, why
Fair.
are you guys not raising up against these people? Because
No,
I
you're
was
right.
just like,
Yeah, yeah. Like, hello, if you're more powerful. But I think we'll keep going before I like
but
chime in.
but I think it's because like they're like like most of the witches once they're found out are like thrown out to the wilderness and most of them don't survive, I'm sure. But
Oof,
I
yeah.
just like it's
Do
just
you
very yeah.
do you think that the Fae think that the witches are more powerful, and that's why they do it, or they just don't like them because they're different or other?
I think it's both.
Yeah, yeah.
I think it's both.
Um, did something that's like totally random that I just thought about, but how you were talking about the magic and they didn't really use the magic much. It felt like it was a lot of build up, and then like it really picked up in the last like 50 to 75 pages at the end,
Mhm.
right?
Yeah.
But I'm nervous for the second book because they end with like Jin saying that he's gonna like Jin saying that they're gonna teach Wyatt magic, right? So
Uh-huh.
I'm a little nervous because I'm like, we already finished the whole book. Like I don't want to go through this like slow, like I don't know
Yeah.
how big of a part it is that they're gonna learn magic and how long that's gonna take, and is it gonna like really slow down the plot? Because I really wish they would have done that in this first book because I'm kind of
Yeah.
like, we're really taking off. And I hope that the second book is not like we take steps back for like Wyatt to figure out how to use his magic for like 3/4 of the book and
Yeah.
then get another 100 pages that are like action
Well,
packed, if that makes sense. It's just a
I'm a little
random
bit
worry.
concerned based on reviews I've read of other books by this author that might be the case a little bit. One, and then two, also,
Great.
I feel like Wyatt, just based on his abilities when he doesn't have any training, is also going to be like super strong. Um,
Right.
so also I think that they could get away if they did it. They could get away with just giving him some cursory lessons, and he already kind of knows how to use his magic, but just giving him some cursory lessons on control.
Well, I just don't want to go
But
through a whole book of like it
I
like really being
agree.
deep and like him learning how to do it for fucking three
I
quarters of the book.
agree.
If that's what
I
happens, I'm
agree.
gonna be annoyed.
Yeah.
Hey, speaking of like Tessa, which is Wyatt's sister not being a raging bitch, you want to talk about a sister who was a raging bitch? Clark.
Always. That's Clark.
So yeah, did you? Okay, I genuinely, which props to the author, I was like, what? Like
Yeah.
I had no idea Clark was going to be part of it. Did you have any? Because I feel like you
Mm,
sometimes pick up on stuff really well.
I wouldn't say I had an idea, but I wouldn't say I necessarily had an idea, but I also didn't wholly trust Wade or Clark.
Yeah,
Um,
I would agree with
because
that about Wade. Like I was like,
but they set that up for you
they
not to
right,
trust him.
totally right. So I was like, that's a little
So
too
yeah,
easy. Like I
yeah,
honestly thought I was more skeptical of like Wade being a bad person. Like I thought,
yeah,
oh, I bet he actually will be good. Like I bet him and his sister will turn around, and then of course they do, right? So
yeah. Well,
Clark,
because like
I was very like, which is fine. It was like a nice little surprise. I was like, that bitch. Like
that,
I was
right?
like, oh my God, she's working with fucking Derek, her other awful brother. God, fucking
Well, and
siblings,
see,
man.
that's the thing is that like I was like, Derek was obviously bad. He was obviously bad, and I also did call like from the beginning that he was influencing her. I was like, or him. I was like, obviously
Yeah,
Derek is
Derek,
influencing Wyatt. Like,
trash.
obviously,
Yeah,
immediately from the beginning, I was like, he's using magic on him. Like, that's absolutely what's happening. So immediately felt that I felt like just because there was three siblings, one of them had to be good, one of them had to be bad. It was too obvious that Wade was like in the writing, Wade was kind of bad based on the writing, but then also like was good. Like it was like Wade was too easy to be the bad guy. So I
yeah,
kind of was like I didn't trust Clark because Wade was too easy. But
fair. Okay.
then but then I was also like Jen doesn't deserve this.
Yeah.
So
Jen.
I didn't want Clark to be bad because of Jen.
Yeah,
Um and I for a bit thought that like Jen, Clark, and Briar were going to all be a couple like a couple. So they were all going to be in a relationship. Like I thought that's where it was going. And then when Clark was the cunt that she was. But I also wonder if some of it, at least when they were like younger, might have been like Derek influencing her and then building on that.
totally didn't even think about that.
So
Yeah,
yeah.
like over the years, especially
But
as
yeah,
living together as siblings, it's like, ooh,
because they've escaped by the end of the book.
yeah.
But also at the same time, too little, too late, and Clark is dead to me.
Oh yeah,
Like,
fuck, yeah. I
there's no
think
redemption.
yeah, they. I'm really interested to see because there's a lot of things open, right? Like for book
Yeah.
two, just kind of like close things out. Like Clark and Derek are awful, and they tried to kill everybody basically, and overthrow the government, and they were in prison, and now they're escaped. So like that whole storyline is out there of like where are they? Because Clark says some line I should have written it down towards Briar at the very end as she's like getting taken away. That's like basically very threatening towards Briar.
Yeah.
So Clark's coming for Briar's ass, and Briar's bitch ass needs to be ready because we find out at the end that Briar is a witch.
Well, she's
So,
a
or she's a
changeling.
changeling, yeah, which
Yeah.
is a witch, right? Like you're
Well, it's like a witch with diluted powers because it's like
it's so
generational. Like
generational. Yeah, you're right. You're right.
she's like a witch who had like one
But
of her
Carl is
ancestors
pretty
was a witch.
strong because the bitch opened up that fucking portal.
Yeah.
So anyway, so at the end you find out that like basically we didn't really talk about this, but there's a portal to the original Feyland, which is like fairy, right? It's called fairy
Yeah.
or something.
Yep.
And no one can get in there. It's bad. It's not livable. The king has been saying it's not livable. Amir's father has been saying this. Come to find out, all a lie. There are Fae that have like in some ways supposedly evolved or mutated or just like
Yeah.
become like very dangerous.
I think of it as like the like nuclear wasteland uh in
In
like
Freeland.
or like in Justice League, you know, like in Justice League in
Oh
the like cutaways,
yeah.
like Superman in the future, we
Yeah.
have those the little
Yeah.
fly guys that come in.
Yeah.
That's what I picture.
They're just like walking around or flying
Yeah.
around. Yeah. So who
Yeah.
knows?
And they're
So
just like crazy ass little nuclear
yeah.
monsters.
Well, we'll
So
see because apparently they're really dangerous, but who knows? Because Amir's dad fucking lies about everything. So they could just be like
mhm.
jaded ass, very highly intellectual people that just want to like figure things out. But anyway, so Derek and, Clark are volatile and they're out there, who knows where. The Fae portal's opened and there's potential that these like dangerous Fae could come in. Wyatt just like said that he wants to work with Amir and stay to like overthrow the entire system of like monarchs.
Mhm.
So there's a lot of things that could happen in the second book. I don't know if it's only going to be two,
It's
but
only a duology.
it is only duology, so
Mhm.
that's good. So there's a lot to do in the second book.
Yeah.
But I did think it left me very interested for reading on, and I
Yeah.
will be. But yeah, I thought it was.
I will be too.
Yeah, I'm curious to see where it goes, and I'm interested. I hope there's more Amir,
I
and I hope there's more Briar because I like them
yeah,
both, and I hope Wyatt's a little bit more digestible for me because
fair.
he was a
Fair.
lot. Because maybe
Um
because he'll be 18, he won't be as
right.
annoying. Oh my
Fair.
god. Poor
Um
17-year-old. He's sweet. He's fine. He has a lot of good
he's sweet.
qualities.
Yeah. I think that Jin and Briar are gonna hook up. That's my
Oh, 100%.
yeah,
Jen and Briar, which I am so here for, and I hope that
yeah,
I'm excited for that.
yeah.
That's gonna be
But then
fun.
there's also the other caveat that like they said that like bonds that like when one of the bonded dies, the other one doesn't typically survive very long after. But that seems to only be between two Fae that are bonded,
Oh
and
yeah, because
since
Jen's a
Jin's
witch.
a witch,
Yeah.
so
Who knows? It's
anyway,
also
I'm
interesting.
interested.
They introduced all the other kings and queens
Uh-huh.
at the end of the book.
Yeah.
So I wonder if like they're going to be a bigger part because had some intrigue with some of the people they introduced. So I don't
Yeah.
know. We'll see.
So overall, I thought it was a very good book. Overall, like I thought it was a good book. I thought that like once again, good for high schoolers. It raises a
Hmm.
lot of questions that I think that people should be thinking about in this day and age, especially for like a young mindset. And
This is
yeah,
so random, but like this book gave me, and we only gave it 3 stars, right? So like it's not like but we liked it. 3 stars for us is like we liked the book. We would recommend the book.
yeah,
This book gave me what I hoped Her Majesty's Royal Coven was going to give me. Like,
yes,
and I still wanted more from the book, right? But
yeah,
like it gave me a better like vibe. Like I enjoyed this more, and it gave me what I thought I was going to get from Her
yeah,
Majesty's Royal, if that
agreed.
makes sense. So
Yep,
if you haven't listened to that episode, listen, and then you'll know what we mean.
exactly. All right. So to wrap us up, I'm going to give a bookish recommendation.
Oh yeah, and then
Yeah.
yeah. Where?
So I am about to head to North Carolina for my sister's bachelorette party.
Oh my gosh, like
And
it's already here.
right, it's in a couple of weeks. Like I head
Yay,
out in a couple of
sister.
weeks.
Yeah.
Yes. So I always go every time I go to North Carolina. Um, the place I have to go every single time is this used bookshop called Ed McKay's. I think it's just called McKay's now. But It is an awesome used bookstore. When I first moved to North Carolina, like when I moved there in 2007, the books were so cheap. Like I could walk out of there with like 25-cent books and it was amazing. They don't
Oh
do
my
that anymore,
god.
unfortunately, inflation. But
I
right, it was amazing. But I really like going there because basically you just like kind of like half price books is here. You
mm,
just sell your books back and you can buy more books and you can work, but they have like a credit system where if you like sell your books, you can kind of just keep store credit. And then when I first moved to North Carolina, when I knew no one in the middle of summer, that summer, I just basically used Ed McKay's as my library and I would go like every day. I would buy like 5 books and then I'd go back the next day and sell them back. And just, I had like this like rotating list of like of store credit and I would just be like, okay, here we go. Time to
I'm
go back.
back. Yeah.
Yeah. I read so many books that summer. It was ridiculous. That was like the height of my like reading life. I don't think I've ever read more books in my entire life in that summer. That summer I read 225 books. So yeah, it was
What?
absurdity. It was
You
absolute
are
absurdity.
fucking kidding me. God, you
I
were
had no friends. I lived in Oklahoma. I'd moved to North Carolina right after my senior year of high school going into college and had no one, knew no one. So for like 3.5 months, I did nothing but read like 4 or 5 books a day.
well, no, I
Um,
mean, I don't think that I'm not laughing at that. That's amazing.
no,
I'm jealous.
yeah,
Very cool.
it no, 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 no. I
That's so many though. Wow.
That's not even anything I think about anymore. That's about how many books I read a year now.
Yeah.
So
Jeez,
yeah,
that's so crazy.
yeah, but Ed McKay's is really awesome. There's so many stores. There used to be one in Greensboro, there's not anymore. There's one in Mebane, and there's one apparently opening in Durham, and that's what me and my like college best friend are going to go do when I go to North Carolina
Ooh,
for my sister's graduation, bachelorette party,
graduation. Yay!
graduation from
It's
singlehood.
because we've been talking. Like, there you go. We've been talking about 17-year-olds, so we're like high school
Yeah,
graduation. No, that's so cool. Way to shout out a book
yeah.
that. So North Carolina, you said?
Yeah, they have some in North Carolina. They have some in Tennessee. Funny story. It
Ah,
used to be a married couple that owned them, and then they divorced, and the wife got some stores, and the husband got some stores. The wife got the stores in Tennessee, I think, and then the husband got the stores in North Carolina. So like, I
for
think you can find,
husband. Just
yeah, I
kidding.
think you can find
Let's
some
go to the ones in
in.
Tennessee.
I think you can find some. I think they're in like Knoxville, and there might,
Ah,
which is not far from your partner's stomping grounds.
I
So
know, I know. But I'm actually gonna like
yeah,
remember this so when we go back to visit his family or just go
yeah,
that direction I can go. But
yeah.
also, so next week we continue our
It's our
indigenous
final one.
I know it's our final book for our Indigenous Peoples Month and our Indigenous authors theme. And we're
Yes,
covering To Shape a Dragon's Breath by Monoquill Black Goose.
yes.
So that's next week. So tune in. Um
Yeah. I don't know why you sounded so hesitant about that. You were like, tune in?
no, it was like, what is something else? Like definitely tune in because we both already read this book. So
Yeah,
lots to talk about there. And then to close out an amazing November for Indigenous Peoples
right?
Month. So
Super excited. Yay.
yeah. See you guys next
All right.
week.
Bye.
Bye.